Hey, so I'm Phil Gerbyshak, and I'm a bit of a hoarder. I hoard books. I've got David Allison's new book. Well, I guess maybe not as new as it once was, but still even more relevant than ever, The Death of Demographics. And we were talking in the green room about what stuff we hoard and why do we hoard it. So, David, why the hell do we hoard stuff? Like, what are you hoarding now?
Well, I've always this sounds really pretentious to say this, but I collect art, but it's not like large capital A art. There's no Jeff Koons or Warhols hanging on my wall, but I've got a lot of different pieces of art, and it's under the bed, it's in the trunk, it's in the back room, it's in the cupboards under the sink in the bathroom, it's on floor to ceiling on the walls here and on our little cottage up the coast. I had a lot of stuff in frames. And so I can kind of sympathize with you, my friend. I can kind of sympathize with that hoarding tendency.
Yeah. So do we hoard because of our values or because what we think people need? I mean, when we talk about this, right? I think it's hard to say, but so maybe as an outsider, you can look in and say, Phil, dude, this is how you stop. Or maybe not.
It's a great way to start this off, because our values do drive everything we do, including bad things or good things, depending on how you look at it, things like hoarding. So, for myself, I might be hoarding. I haven't really ever thought about this before, but I might be hoarding art because of social standing is one of the 56 values in the Valuegraphics database. And I just don't want to have a smaller collection. I want to have a big collection. There's something kind of that puts me in the pecking order of art collectors to say, oh, I have so much art. It's hanging on all the walls. It's under the bed. It's in the trunk. There's a little bit of a humble brag that's in there. So that might be one of the reasons that's driving me. I know another reason that's driving me for sure is that I collect art that's based on stories. So the art has to be like this revelatory, like, wow, I've never thought about the world that way. What an amazing piece of insight or intuition. And somehow by not having that in my life anymore, I feel like I'm going to be less. So it might be personal growth that is the value that I'm scared of damaging. And for you, I'm not sure. You have to do a little searching and try and figure out, what's it about? Why am I keeping all this stuff?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah, so that'll be a conversation for another day, because this was impromptu here, talking about that, right? Because we just talked about it prepping here, but value graphics, right? How we market to those people. So, David, how would I market to you, someone who values those things? What would I do to make that more relevant, to get you to maybe buy more art?
Right. Well, okay, let's keep this is uncomfortable. Let's keep using David as a case study. Social standing and personal growth were the two things I threw out there around my art collection. So if you were trying to get me to come to your gallery and buy art from you, you'd need to convince me that this is going to improve my social standing within the circles that I care about. So presumably the art collecting world. Who else is going to be at that opening? I'd want to know that. I'd want to know that this artist that you're asking me to come and look at the work that you're going to put up on the walls and you're going to try and sell that night, that this artist is a respected artist, that they're collected, they're in the Museum of Modern Art collection, that they're, that you're giving me some more breadcrumbs that say that this is going to get me the social standing that I'm looking for. And from a personal growth perspective, for me anyway, personal growth in this instance is about those stories fuel me. When I come home from a long business trip, the first thing I do is run around and look at all my art and go, hey, buddy, oh, wow. Like every day it's telling me new things. It's teaching me stuff. So I would want to know that about the artist that you want me to come and see at the opening, that you want me to come to at the art gallery tonight. So instead of saying to me, well, the opening's from here to this time, and here's the location and the artist, his name is whatever. And by the way, the mayor's going to be there. And by the way, this important collector from the Museum of Modern Art is coming, and they're going to say a few words. And by the way, here's a link to some background on this artist and what their stories are all about and how they look at art and how they create their work. Well, now you've given me all the ingredients I need to go, yep, this lines up with my values. I'm going to go to this thing and I'm bringing my wallet. And that's kind of what we're all trying to do, isn't it? Get somebody to say, this sounds like it's the right thing for me, and here's my credit card number.
Yeah, right on. So, and that makes so much sense. That consistent alignment, the story which is interesting. But one of the things there that sounded very interesting to me is the different way that you might collect art than me. I like to look for the unknown artist. I'm looking for the person who nobody's heard of, but I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. I hadn't thought about that. That maybe helps me look at it from a different way. Or sometimes I like photography art,
Yep.
that I've never, places I've not been, because they're places I want to go, stories that I want to create. So maybe my stuff is, even the books are more aspirational.
So
as
it
a
sounds to
value.
me like, based on that, you might have some values that are around experiences, because
Yeah.
you just in your riff there said that these are photos of places that I would like to be, that I've never been before, that I'd like to visit. So that sounds like an experience value coming to the forefront. And the idea of trying to find the new person, the new artist that no one's ever heard of, that's also in its way an experience. So you're shopping, you're looking, you're collecting art based on experience is one value at the very least. Whereas my collection is my motivation, my values are slightly different than yours. But the most important point about this is that for neither one of us did our demographics come into play. It has nothing to do with our age, our gender, our income, marital status, number of kids, education, none of that stuff. None of that is going to make me go and collect a particular piece of art, or you. It has everything to do with what's in our hearts and what drives us. So that's the key. Is you got to get down there and sort that stuff out. But you know what we do? We sit in our boardrooms and we go, well, who's my target customer? Well, let's see. They're 18 to 24-year-olds, and they're men, and they earn $50,000 a year, and they just got out of, I guess that's a little bit much for 18, 24. So say 25, 36-year-olds, and they just got out of college, and they're making $75,000 a year in a white collar job, and they're single, and they hope to be married one day. And so now let's make some stuff for them. Like, you don't know anything about them at that point. You know what they are, but you don't know who they are. And to be able to sell something to someone, or to get someone engaged with your idea, or to convince someone that your perspective on things is the one that they should adopt, you need to know what they value, because that's how we make every decision in our life, is run around and chasing things that align with our values. It's really quite simple.
Yeah. And it's simple, but not easy. I mean,
No.
that's the interesting thing. I mean, that you've got a ton of different archetypes in here. I'm looking through here, I'm like, good God. I mean, this is like, it blows my brains away, right? Like the spiritual, I'm like, that's so interesting, right? Religion, spirituality with their daily rituals. I'm like, might they find a different way to look at art as well? Because it might be something then that they might look at and then posit that connects them with their creator
Yeah,
or whatever,
probably,
right?
probably. So you brought up a lot of stuff there, like religion and spirituality, as we should talk about that as one of the values. Because remember, there's 56 values. That's it. There's only 56 things that drive us all around the world, all human beings. I can say this with some authority because we've now profiled close to 1 million people around the world across 180 countries and 152 languages. So there are only 56 values that drive us all around the world. Beautiful, unifying fact. That's not many things that make us different from each other, no matter what anybody tries to tell you. So of those 56 values, religion and spirituality shows up in different places for different people in different parts of the world. But it is a really broad, beautiful value, because for some people, a spiritual experience is yoga. And for others, it's going for a walk in the woods on the weekend with their best friend and a dog. And for others, yes, it's high Orthodox Christianity, or going to temple, or going to whatever house of worship you go to. So it's all in there. I don't really care, as a sociological researcher and as somebody who spends their life trying to understand people. I don't care how you define it. What I care about is that you're using your version of that to make decisions about things. And if I know that about you, now I can use that information to make sure that I'm talking into that value, and that I'm going to be connecting with you around the things that are important to you. So yes, somebody who values religion and spirituality will be driven to make every decision in their life in a way that is aligned with that particular version for them of that value. Now, you mentioned the book. It has, thank you bringing that up already. We're starting with the plugs really early in this episode. That's fantastic. There's a 15-question quiz in the book. And if you send that out to whoever it is you're trying to understand, the scoring key in there will allow you to choose a chapter. that aligns with each chapter is 15 archetypes. So there's 15 chapters, 15 archetypes. The test and the scoring will help you choose which of those chapters, which of those archetypes is most like the people you sent that particular wave of the survey out to. And in that chapter, we tell you everything we know about that archetype. But here's the warning. That's only 15 archetypes. That's like saying everybody on earth fits into one of 15 categories, which is hysterically nonsensical. We're way too complex for that. But at least it's a start. With a simple little 15 question quiz, anybody who wants to spend, I don't know, it's like $10 for the Kindle version of the book, I think. You can get the quiz, use it, and you start to see how values can form your strategies, your thinking, your marketing, your whatever it is you're trying to do. So awesome. I hope it helps some people.
Yeah, well, I think it will if they take the time to dive in and actually do the work, which is often where people miss. So as we think about that, though, how do we incent a salesperson? How do we incent a leader to say, you know what, I'm going to invest this time. It's going to take me half an hour, maybe longer than that, perhaps, to really do this. How do we incent them, David, to show them that this is really work worth doing?
Well, before we end today, remind me to give you an even simpler version with just 3 questions that people can use to start to understand, folks. But what's the incentive? Demographics, which is the way we tend to look at people now, they're only about 10% accurate. So if you profile a group of people and say they're a certain age, gender, income, marital status, number of kids, all that kind of stuff, and think that you now know who they are, you're going to only be right about 10%. The actual number is 10.5% on average across all of those different demographic categories. Again, how do I know this? 1 million surveys we've done around the world. So there's only about 10% level of similarity to people inside any demographically described groups. It's not really good. If you're spending $1 on that group of people, you're going to be wasting 90 cents. It's not a really effective use of your money. It's why so much marketing and sales and all these kinds of activities where we're trying to convince people to do something we'd like them to do. You call it spray and pray, right? You just like spend out as many messages as you possibly can and hope it's going to land on the right person at the right time. You're going to get about 10%. So your $1 million budget, if you can hit about 10% of those dollars directly on the people who you should be talking to, then that's great. You've done a good job. Most of us will only get to 5%, 4%. That's why when we send out a direct marketing campaign and you get a 3.5%, 4% open rate, we all think we've just struck the jackpot. Because, oh my God, 4%, let's pop the champagne. What an amazing campaign we just launched. It's because we're using demographics to target people. Now, if you use values to target people, it's as much as 8 times more powerful. So that same buck that you're spending, instead of it getting you about a 10% ROI, it's going to get you about an 80% ROI. That's 80 cents on the dollar instead of 10 cents on the dollar. And even if it's half wrong, which it's not, that would still be 40 cents on the dollar instead of 10 cents on the dollar. I'll tell you how wrong it is. If there's data geeks listening, it's plus or minus 3.5% wrong. We know that with a 95% level of confidence. So this stuff works. It's a basic, fundamental part of human biological life. Our brains are hardwired to run towards anything that aligns with our values. So if you know what someone values, you know what they're going to be running towards, be that. Give them that, and they'll run towards you. It's a simple principle, but the amount of data and research we've had to do to get to a point where it's actually actionable is enormous. It's very, very complex, but the idea has been around forever. People have been studying this for decades and decades and decades. People run towards the things they value. There you go.
Yeah. Well, and that's powerful to understand because now we can start having better conversations. Now we can start talking about things that really matter to people instead of, David, I see you have 2 ears and so do I. So let's do some business together, right? I mean, that's always the interesting thing to me. So with that, you talked about though that 8x multiplier. And that's awesome. But let's talk about price premium because this one really kind of blows me away that this is something that changes people, right? 12% more across categories for options that align with their values. That's so interesting to me.
You-
So let's talk about that.
Yeah, you've done your homework. We call it return on values. So we measure around the world now across dozens and dozens and dozens of categories and all these studies we've done. We measure three kinds of return on value. One is price, and you hit it on the head. People will spend as much as 12% more for something that's aligned with their values. So think about that for a second. You're standing in the grocery store and you got 2 cans of soup in your hand, and you're trying to make a decision. Now you're not going to be doing this consciously. You're just like split second, right? Your brain's doing this work for you in the blink of an eye. But something's going to make you choose one over the other. Might be price, but it might be that this one's a little bit more environmentally friendly. The packaging says something about sustainability and not hurting the rainforest or something. And this one maybe has got a gold label on it and it's a little shiny looking. It feels a little more upscale. And so something will make you pay a little bit more because that one is aligned with who you see yourself as, how you look at the world, what your values are. If ambition and social standing is what you're all about, then you're going to go for the one that looks like luxury soup, if there's such a thing. If environmentalism and sustainability are more your value profile, then you're going to pay a little bit more for that one. Or maybe it's about family. There's a third one in the mix all of a sudden, family soup that's made with ingredients that are really healthy for your family. Now we got health and well-being and family going with a third contender, and I'll pay a little bit more for that one because it's going to be better for my family and it's going to make me feel like I'm being more healthy and well. So in a context like that, it's easy to see. We've all done that. We've all spent the extra buck on the thing that feels like that's the one I need without even really thinking about it all that much. But that's in fact how we make every decision thousands of times a day. Your decision to wear what you're wearing today, choosing to have that sweater and that pair of glasses on, that was a conscious decision this morning that your brain said, this is aligning with my values, purchasing those things in the first place. We just started. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about where you're living these days because your horde fans will like find you and start stalking your new home. But you've just moved to Ohio and you did that because of a personal reason. And though that decision, you sat down with your wife, you made the decision to do this, you used a set of filters to say, is this smart? Is this not smart? What are the upsides? What are the downsides? All of that was a very big decision. So you're doing it in a very obvious way, but that decision was entirely based on which one is aligning best with our values. What's more important to us? The stuff we get by staying here or the stuff we get by going there? And that's how we made the decision. But it's happening all day long. And it's fascinating. Once you start to look for this in people, you just like talking to someone casually and you're like, wow, they just told me they did this thing or they're going to this place. Or then you're like, wow, I know a little bit more about that person now because I'm starting to see how they're making their decisions. And I know that they're going to use that same filtering mechanism to make the next decision and the next decision and the next decision. It can be a bit of a blessing and a curse because you just don't ever talk to people anymore without going, what's driving that, I wonder? And you learn some really crazy things.
Yeah. Well, and it also requires us to pay full attention to people, which I think is different, right? I mean, yes, there's shortcuts that you're talking about, but we miss them if we're not actually listening, if we're not actually paying attention to them. Yes, no, maybe.
Absolutely. For me anyway, I mean, I'm marinating in this, right? I mean, this is what I do for a living. So I think about values all the time, but it's not that hard to kind of just switch it on. And you don't have to be focused and concentrating like you're trying to solve the mysteries of the universe. Just listening to what people are saying and understanding that what they're saying is coming from somewhere. And that's somewhere it's coming from. If you can get to that, you might need to ask a follow-up question or two. They say, blah, 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 I'm doing this. You go, well, why are you doing that? Did you think about this other thing instead? You did. Oh, and you chose that one. And then just registering with yourself that that's a filtering mechanism that they're now going to apply to the can of soup in the grocery store and what pair of glasses they're going to wear today and whether they're going to move to a new state. It's going to be the same set of filters. People don't change their values. You only get a certain number. They're yours for the rest of your life. And once you can kind of start to get into people's heads and see where those values are, where they're sitting and what they're all about, it's fascinating how transparent other people become. You start to know, you're like, if I say this, they're going to say yes. And if I say this, Same thing, say it in a slightly different way, they're going to say no. So for a salesperson, it's like a magic superpower to be able to figure out how to frame things up in a way that people will run towards.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. So if only there were a 3-question shortcut, maybe some telltale questions, David, that we might use for this. Is that possible, David? What do you got?
It's absolutely possible. It's absolutely possible. Oh, and we have to go back and talk about return on values for a moment, because I'm ping-ponging around here.
Back up.
So we'll do the 3 questions. I'm going to keep everybody hanging on the edge of their seat. But so we talked about return on values around price. Price will go up 12% across the board, across categories, if people feel that whatever they're buying is aligned with their values. Similarly, they will trust you or a brand 20% more if they feel like their values are there. So if you're trying to establish 20% jump just for people feeling like you read their diary, like you know who they are, you're talking to their values, they will trust you 20% more. Now, if you're like, let's say, wealth advisor or a lawyer or insurance sales or trying to sell products or services, if you can get people to trust you 20% more and pay you 12% more, and all you got to do is kind of figure out where they're coming from, what those values are that are driving them, well, now you're going to like top the charts. And then the third thing that values will impact is engagement. So anybody who's trying to build a community, which is a phrase we hear all too much these days, we're not a brand, we're a community. So if you're really trying to build a sense of community, it'll go up 40% if people feel like their values are reflected in that particular community that you're asking them to engage with. So 12% price, 20% trust, 40% engagement for simply trying to figure out what people's values are. It's really, really worthwhile. Okay, and here's 3 questions you can use to do that. Now, you should feel free to reword these so that they don't sound like you're memorizing someone else's question. And you can do this in a few different ways. You can just kind of weave these into casual conversation. You can make them, some kind of a way to kill some time while there's a process going on. Like I'll often say, take this metaphorically, but you're working in a shoe store, while you're wrapping up the shoes, you can say to people, hey, I heard a funny question at this dinner I was at last night. What's your answer to this question? You got to have something to say while you're doing some stuff sometimes. So that's another way to do it. You could even, if you want to get formal about it, send these out as an email to your database and see what kind of answers you get. People will answer these questions in ways that will start to help you see where they're coming from. And you got to listen for the patterns. You got to ask lots and lots of people over the course of time and listen for the patterns in the noise. And you'll start to get a sense of what's driving this group of people you're asking. So if you just keep asking your customers, eventually you'll start to see your customers that have got these similar patterns in the noise. So first question, why do you go to work? People will tell you all kinds of things. It's because it's my creative outlet. It's because I need to provide for my family. It's because that's where my friends are. It's because I feel like I'm making a difference in the world somehow. So those are the patterns I'm talking about. You want to hear what people have to say about why do you go to work? And you'll start to see their values bubble to the surface. And the second question is, why would you give away half of your lottery winnings? Now, there's always some smart ass who's going to say, well, I wouldn't. You go, yeah, okay. But let's say you were going to give away half of your lottery winnings. Why would you give them away? And the first answer people will give you is something about where. They're going to say, oh, I'll give it to the Cancer Foundation. I'm going to give it to the local arts or whatever. Is it? No. Why? Why would you give away half of your lottery winnings? And again, listen for the patterns in the noise, and you'll start to see some commonalities popping up around any group of people you're talking to. And the third one, which is my favorite, and which is a great way to get to know your friends. Next time they've had a couple of glasses of wine around your dining room table, ask this question and see what comes up. You get to say one thing to yourself from 10 years ago. What would you say? And more importantly, why would you say that thing? Now, again, some smartass is going to say, buy Google stock. You go, okay, great. Got that out of your system? Cool. Okay, now what would you really want your 10 years ago self to know? And why would you want that thing to be the one thing you choose. And listen for the patterns and the noise, and you'll start to hear some commonalities. So those 3 questions, ask them all, ask one at a time, just make it a habit, sort of get it into just as part of your routine, as you're just always asking some version of those 3 questions. You'll start to hear values. And then you just have to become the person, the brand, the organization who's providing more of what people value. And you get your 12% price lift, your 20% trust lift, and your 40% engagement lift.
Wow. 3 powerful questions that if we are listening, we'll see patterns in. We'll see patterns throughout that, right? Depending on the group that they're in.
Yeah.
I think that is helpful. That is very helpful. So with that, David, if people are starting out, right, if they're early on their value graphics journey and understanding values and maybe even starting with their own, we have you're nice enough. You put together 3 videos for us at valuegraphics.online/Phil for folks. You can get sign up for David's mailing list, learn more about the book, and get these 3 great videos. But David, where would you say, Phil, you're new to this, get started. Here's how you start.
Well, it depends on why you want to get started, I suppose. But just being a little more introspective about yourself is a really great place to start. Why did you make that last big decision? Like you and your wife, you just decided to move. When I asked you why, you said, well, she got a really great job. Cool. Why did you decide that was the right move? And why was it that job? And why wasn't staying where you were and trying to find something equally go down as far as you can and just start to be a little more introspective about where are you coming from? And even on simple things, next time you're literally in the grocery store, why am I buying this one? Why am I not buying that one? Just ask yourself some questions like that. So you start to see values in action. And then you can start doing that one level out and going, okay, well, what about the people around me? I'm going to ask them some questions and start seeing what's driving them. Values drive everyone to do everything 24/7, 365. And it's like we're all walking around with blindfolds on, not knowing why people are doing the things they're doing. So if you just take the blindfold off, that's a great first step. And then from there, a lot of this will become intuitive. My book's a great resource. We spill the beans, spill our guts, whatever I'm mixing them all up. All the metaphors are coming together today. You're getting 2 metaphors for the price of 1.
Spilling the soup can.
Spilling the soup can guts in the beans. That's what we're doing. Yum. It's all in there. There's a whole bunch of really great information in that book. And in case anyone thinks I'm trying to get rich off a book, I make about $1 a copy. So if everybody buys 10 copies, I might get a nice bottle of wine one day. That's about as far as it's going to go. But that's a great resource. Follow me on LinkedIn. We're always publishing new stuff and doing studies and putting information out there. And, our code word or our filter before we push anything out on social media is this helpful? So we're always trying to be helpful and just give stuff away and share what we've learned about things. There's a couple of websites. You can go to valuegraphics.com. That's the research company that we use to help companies when they come to us and say, help us understand our target audience, David. We go, okay, cool. This runs through the Valuegraphics research company. We use our database and we are able to tell companies all kinds of great things about their customers and prospects and competitors' customers. And then there's davidallisoninc.com. And that's where my speaking and my writing and my books and everything, that's the website for that stuff. So maybe you want to hire me to come and speak at your next corporate event or your next association gathering or something. And when I do that, I bring data for whoever's in the audience. So, what's a good one? Recent one I did, spoke to an organization that is all the pet food manufacturers. So everybody in the room makes pet food. And I was able to get up on stage and say, hey, here's what makes people buy pet food. Here's the values you need to be targeting with whoever you are in the pet food industry, the pet food decision makers. This is what they care about. So hopefully there's a lot of ways that people can find out about this stuff. Great podcasts like yours. Twice now you've had me here and allowed me to talk. So yeah, we really have a mission here, a thing we're trying to accomplish in the world. And that's to get everybody off this addiction we have to demographics as a way to understand people, because they're inaccurate. We've talked about that, but they're also really harmful, because if we keep looking at people and say, well, They're women. They're 73% of my audience is female. And then what do you do with that? You just start making up stuff and like make everything pink. Like you just do ridiculous stereotypical responses, because what else you got? You know, the fact that somebody earns $250,000 a year, what are you going to do with that? You just assume that they like luxury brands and that they're going to like, you know, silver and gold and diamonds and caviar and champagne. I mean, I'm being silly to make a point. It's stereotyping. And those stereotypes are so pervasive that they end up just propping up ageism and sexism and racism and homophobia. And that's why we're doing what we're doing. We want to try and give people an alternative way to understand each other, an alternative way to understand themselves, the people that are important to them, and the people that they're trying to engage and influence with their work. Because we have to. Look at this world we're living in right now. The divisiveness on this planet is insane. The fights we're having, the political intrigues that are going on, the everything is so. We need things that unify us, that bring us together, and our values unite us across all of those artificial divides. So enough of the soapboxing. It'll make you money, and it'll help make the world a better place too. So it's a twofer.
Yeah. Well, and there's only 56 of them.
Yeah.
So it's taking the time to learn, as you said, about ourselves first, so that we can connect with our world second and make a difference and make a bigger impact. So David, awesome stuff as always. Love it. Great book, friends. If you're looking for something to read, it's a longer book because you can pop around. I would say this is it's an easy read. And then it's a hard read. And by that, I mean, you read it and you're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And then it's hard because you want to put it in practice. But I encourage folks, get a copy of the book, learn about the death of demographics, learn from David Allison. Again, check out valuegraphics.online/Phil. David put together a nice page for us. You don't have to opt in or anything if you don't want to, but they do put out more research. Check out those videos. David goes in depth about those 3 questions you can use and help us learn more about those values that drive us. Thank you so much, David. As always, it's a pleasure to speak with you, my friend.
Thanks for having me over, and happy house warming. I need to send you a lamp or a plant or something. Happy new house.
There you go.